Thank you. Good morning. Just out of interest, how many people have heard of the Cybersecurity Hub? All right, that's encouraging. Maybe just some context. Let's just talk about the legislative framework. So, I mean, every national department creates an enabling environment, right? So, whether it's SME development or housing, the role of national government is to create an enabling environment. And the same is true of cybersecurity. So the enabling environment in South Africa is always policy legislation and then subordinate legislation, which is generally regulation. So for cybersecurity, we have something called a National Cybersecurity Policy Framework. It was passed by our parliament in March 2012 or so, and it creates the overall holistic policy framework for cybersecurity. From the policy framework, and generally this is what happens, emerges multiple pieces of legislation and bills. And the first one that's emerged from the NCPF is a Cybercrimes and Cybersecurity Bill, which is currently before Parliament. Policy and legislation, the difference is legislation generally gives you more teeth, right? It places more obligations on organizations and institutions, while the policy framework is more overarching and lays out the strategy. So the Cybercrimes Bill, when it does get passed, mandates makes obligations on institutions much more stricter, and from there it also has a regulatory, and I know regulation is a swear word, but it also has some regulatory element, right? And regulatory and these subordinate legislation you only use if the market to correct to self-correct a market, right? So the Cybercrimes Bill we expect to get passed in early next year, and those two pieces of legislation encapsulate everything that we need to think about as institutions around cybersecurity. The strategy of both pieces of legislation talks to something called national CSIRs, right? And a CSIR is a computer security incident response team, and many countries have them. But these CSIRs have specific national mandates, right? And our two pieces of legislation talk to five national CSIRs. So the first one is Cyber Command, and Cyber Command is a CSIR that sits under the DoD, right? And it's going to be responsible for things like terrorism and threats to critical infrastructure. The second national CSIR is the government CSIR. It sits under the State Security Agency, and it has a mandate for the public sector. So all public state-owned companies, provincial department, national departments. The third CSIR is the Cybersecurity Hub. It sits under the Department of Telecoms and Postal Services, and its mandate is the private sector and civil society. The fourth is the National Cyber Crimes Unit. It's the 24/7 contact center under SAPS. And all of these national CSIRs will eventually report into a coordinating national CSIRs. So CSIRs take on these national CSIRs. You can have many, they come in many different guises, right? Some of them are coordinating, some of them are national, and this will be a national coordinating CSIR. So these four CSIRs, with their specific mandates, they will report into that. And then there's a committee called the Cybersecurity Response Committee, which is deemed to look at, tries to take away the siloed approach of cybersecurity and ensures there's coordination around this. So that's the institutions mandated by the two pieces of legislation. So currently, this is the CSIR that I'm responsible for. In Africa, we have about 16 countries with CSIRs currently, with national CSIRs or multiple national CSIRs, and about 103 countries with them. So the Cybersecurity Hub physically sits at the CSIR, right? Building 44, you're all welcome to see it. It was opened in March 2012. And you can see a couple of ministers there, the Minister of Telecoms and the State Security. We have a smallish type SOC, and if you come there, we'll explain more around what we do. So if you go back to the NCPF Chapter 6, it spells out exactly what the Cybersecurity Hub's mandate is, and it's a fairly broad and extensive mandate, right? So we've tried to kind of put them together, and we've come up with understatements where we kind of grouped them together, and we came up with a couple of things that we need to do. CSIR establishment, there's a lot of emphasis in the NCPF around public-private partnerships, because like Paul said, this isn't something any one institution or any one government department is capable of doing. There's information dissemination, best practice guidelines, audit readiness exercises. A lot of the information we find is very anecdotal, right? There's no real empirical evidence. You know, when people say we lose 2 million rand in this year and all of that, I don't think there's a lot of empirical evidence around that. A lot of it's anecdotal. So we're trying to put that right. And we have a big cybersecurity awareness mandate as well. All right, sorry for the bouncy headings. I thought I'd gotten rid of all of them. Okay, so national CSIRs follow a maturity level, right? You don't often get a national CSIR that does everything it's supposed to do. There's a maturity model of services that you can offer. So we've picked the ones that we think meet our national mandate, and those are the ones in bold, and those are the ones we're concentrating on. Eventually, a fully fledged national CSIR will offer all of these. Coordinating CSIR may not need to offer all of these, but it's very much based on your mandate, right? One of the things we are trying to do, national CSIRs or even sector-based CSIRs often seek membership to an organization called FIRST, Forum of Incident and Response Security Teams. There's currently 3 in the country: is Standard Bank, First National Bank, and the State Security Agency. So what it means is this is an all boys club, it's a membership thing, it's not an affiliation or certification. It means they've come, they've checked your CSIRT, and your policies are up to date, your security is up to date, and you have confidence. So what that means is if I had to speak to my contemporary, say in Japan, and I can say I'm first certified, he's more likely to help me, right? A lot of cybersecurity incidents are very much based on people you know and that kind of network and how to resolve them. And they're all very much transnational in nature. So being a member of FIRST is important. There are other certifications as well. The ITU offers an impact certification for CSIRs. There's a lot of regional and international instruments that are currently being negotiated around cybersecurity, right? There's an African Union Convention on Cybersecurity. There's a Budapest Convention that emerged out of the European Union. And we are encouraged often to sign some of those, and for whatever geopolitical reasons, we sign some of them, we don't sign some of them. But I think what's important for organizations to understand is that because of this transnational nature of cybersecurity, we need to have a more global view of what's happening. Things like the GDPR, which is emerging from the European Union around privacy, it's going to impact us, even though it's an EU bill. If there is an international instrument that gets negotiated at the UN type level, it's going to have implications for organizations and for countries as well. So coordination. So Paul spoke about sector-based CSIS. Both pieces of legislation, the strategy is to encourage a collective capability around cybersecurity, meaning sectors need to get together and create these nodal points or these sector CSIRs. So I'm just going to unpack the finance sector. So the finance sector, we have SABRIC, South African Banking Risk Information Center. Paul's covered most of it. 17 banks have gotten together. They've created some kind of collective capability. So we can pretty much put a tick box against SABRIC in the banking sector and say, they're covering themselves, right? There's awareness training between them. They share threat information, and Paul covered it with the steering committee and all of that. So under the finance sector, there are other CSIRs as well. There's PASA, the Payments Associations of South Africa, which talks to the broader finance ecosystem, clearing houses and things like that. There's the Associations of Savings and Investment South Africa, which looks at the big investment companies like Alan Gray's of the world. The Financial Markets Infrastructure, which is Reserve Bank, JSE, Straight and BankServe, and others. So instinctively, when you talk about the finance sector and creating a collective capability, instinctively your mind says, one sector CSIR should do, right? But the granularity of a sector means multiple of these sector CSIRs need to be developed before a sector is fully covered. So that model now needs to be replicated across various other sectors, right? So conceivably, the number of CSIRs here, the sector CSIRs, will grow rapidly in the next couple of years. The education sector has a SANRAN tenet, which takes care of most of the universities, a couple of the research councils, and a couple of museums. So that sector again is fairly mature. Another problem is, one of the issues is that the current NCPF doesn't place obligations on a sector to actually create a CSIRT. So there's no obligation on the logistics sector, for example, to create a sector CSIRT, right? There's a couple more, I'll get back to that point. There's a couple more CSIRs that have come on board more recently. The Consumer Goods Council, which is a fairly big sector for us. So we can't take, the hub can't take too much credit for these, right? These sector CSIRs were pretty much on board before the hub was formed. But we can take a little bit of credit for this. We've been speaking to the Consumer Goods Council quite aggressively. They've now decided to create a sector CSIR for the retail sector. Very important, 2.8 million people is Pick n Pay, Spar. So we're quite happy with that. And the ISPA, Internet Service Providers Association, is in the process of creating a sector CSIR. So the problem I was talking about is that there's no obligations in the NCPA for a nodal point for a sector to create a sector CSIR, right? But the Cybercrimes Bill does place some kind of obligation. Now the Cybercrimes Bill is before Parliament. It may not emerge from Parliament unscathed the way it went in, but some parts of it, or most parts of it will. The regulatory part around the creation of the sector CSIRs probably will. And that's what I meant when I said it gives more bite, more obligations. So there's more obligations on a sector CSIR to actually create some kind of collective capability when the bill eventually gets passed. And this part talks about the regulatory part, and it gives the hub, the Cybersecurity Hub, some kind of regulatory authority to create the sector CSIRs. So what it means personally for me, it makes me immensely more powerful next year and more disliked. So, but we'll see how that emerges in the next couple of years. Some of the things we've tried to do is, earlier this year, we spoke to all of the sector CSIRs and said, let's create a forum so we can start talking about standards. So we created a sector CSIR forum. There's nothing in the legislation that talks to something like this, but it's implied in the legislation. So it's an informal body right now, but we thought while the number of sector CSIRs are at a manageable level, let's create some kind of collective capability, because these numbers are going to increase rapidly, right? Well, we hope they will. So we have a sector CSIR, and it looks at quite a few things around standards, and Paul spoke about standards. Oh my, okay, right, so I'm going to have to go much faster. The bouncy headings don't help too much. So the Standard Bank attack last year with 300 million rand, Paul was talking about, so we were involved in that. And one of the things we realized is that we need some kind of war room capability where we can at least, when there's an attack at a national level, we can coordinate how we respond to that, right? We not be able to resolve, so in the hub we're trying to create some kind of war room. It's not as fancy as it sounds, it's some piece of collaborative software, so that when something happens, we can call up the powers that be and at least try and coordinate the response to it, with the Japanese ambassador, Paul, or somebody, so that at least we can start talking. So that's in progress. Homegrown tools. We believe there's a real need to create cybersecurity tools within the country. It builds confidence, it talks to the SMME sectors. I'm going to go really fast now, right, but I'll leave these slides behind. So we're doing some kind of due diligence around this, and we hope at some stage look at some kind of incentive, and we're working with the CSIR quite closely, because that's part of what their mandate is, to look at how we can develop these cybersecurity tools in country. Dissemination of information. Our Cybersecurity Hub has a website. So if you're a sector-based CSIRT, you will come there and you will get a whole lot of information available. We are getting regular security alerts from the State Security Agency. We're getting some proprietary information from the Kaspersky's and the Microsoft of the world. So those are on our website. You just need to get hold of me, and then we give you some kind of access to it, and you can get that regularly, and you can get all of these threat feeds. We are piloting a business intelligence solution again with the CSIR. We are looking at a couple of use cases around proprietary information, publicly available information, but one of the use cases that we are really keen on is to take incident information coming out from the CSIRTs, feed it into this BI tool, take it out for a test drive, and what looks like it's emerging, it will be a South African type threat feed. So that's progressing very well, and we should have some good results in the next couple of months. Provide guidance. All right. I spoke about this lack of empirical data, right? So I still think, and people will challenge me on that, but I think there's a lack of empirical data around cybersecurity. So we created a sector CSIR, a readiness survey last year, which was sector-based. We ran it for about 6 months, and it asked really baseline questions, right? Do you have plans? How often do you look at those plans? Is it a governance type issue? Do you have budget and all that? It's a very extensive survey. We had problems getting people to respond, but we've got enough now. We've started the analysis. The first draft is out. We think it's a really good piece of work. It will be publicly available in the next couple of weeks. And things that are emerging, I just picked out a couple, right? It's a draft report, again, something done with CSIR jointly, is that 18% plans developed and will implement in the next 6 to 12 months, fully functional plans, so 30%, 29% of organizations say they have plans, right? And I've just pulled this out, I haven't analyzed this data, it's just something just to start socializing this idea of the readiness survey. 23% people have their own budget, reporting function, you'll see, it's very much a chief information officer program, kind of reporting line. And I think these things are important for things like King 4, right, where the governance issues becomes more important. And so if people are saying that cybersecurity is a CIO type function, then the board needs to take more responsibility around that, especially for King 4, right? So those things are important. So this report will be available in the next 4 to 6 weeks. It'll be on our website, and yeah, so you can download all of that. The ecosystem, and Paul spoke about this as well, the ecosystem of these standards are really, really complicated, right? You get ISO standards, you get IEC standards, you get NIST standards, and what we're trying to do is clear the landscape of these standards and not be prescriptive around it, but at least give these sector CSIRs an understanding of what standards are possible, right? Do you want to be a risk-based approach, then you go at 27,004 into a 27,001 and a 27,032, and we're trying to map that out in a research project, which and paper will also be available in the next couple of months, again with the CSIR. So CSIR is our strategic partner. If we haven't figured that out by now, so we're doing all of that with them. One of the standards we are looking at is how to exchange threat information, and we've standardized on something called TAXI and STIX. If you guys know that, that will be, so when an organization reports a malware, it will be a malware to everybody, right? Or a DDoS will be a DDoS to everybody. So those are kind of standards again that we hope to release in the next couple of weeks. We are trying to embed it in some research again so that we've done our due diligence. Skills frameworks is an endemic shortage of skills. We have looked at a couple of frameworks. There's a NIST framework, and within NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. They have a NIST framework, the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education. It covers all of the roles and responsibilities for cybersecurity. We've taken that, we've customized it to a South African type context, and we've socialized it with about 11 of the CETAs, and they've adopted it as a skills framework, and CETAs will do what CETAs do and create all the artifacts around that. And that again should become our skills framework to massify this training, right? And universities are offering a lot of training, but that's normally high end, and we need a lot of people around the penetration testing and the more operational type skills, and we believe the CETAs are the right place to do that. So that's also available, but that's within the context of the CETAs. Awareness is a big part of our mandate. I'm almost done. So we're releasing a national awareness portal. It's done. October is National Awareness Month. So the portal is available. The portal is just an exoskeleton, right? So we are looking for partners to actually run programs on the portal. So as you know, the hub can't be sitting and writing PDFs on cyberbullying and all of that. So we're looking for partners to actually put their material on the website, run joint programs, and all things are possible. So again, I'll leave my details. Please contact me if you have awareness information. Yeah, that's it. And in conclusion, South Africa is now rated 8th in Africa. I don't think that's really good, actually, to be quite honest. This is one of the ITU security indices, and yeah, I think there's a real need to actually. I think we've been lucky so far, to be quite honest. So, yeah, all right, that's it.